Well, it looks like the number of new attendees joining us is slowing down, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, as the case may be. It looks like we have people from the U.S., Canada, and a few from Europe as well. This has turned out to be a very popular webinar. We've got over 280 registrants. It looks like they aren't all here yet, but we expect to see more coming on board. Thank you all for coming. My name is Steve Brugger, and I'm the president of Oxford Computer Group's North American operations. I'm here to give you a brief background on OCG and to introduce you to our speaker today, James Cowling, who is the Chief Technical Officer of OCG. Oxford's roots in identity management go way back to the early days of Exchange, which was Microsoft's first X400, X500 compliant mail system, and it also provided the platform for what eventually became Active Directory. I first met James around the time he was training a lot of Microsoft's engineers throughout Europe on X400 and 500. He later traveled the world again teaching Microsoft employees and key technical partners on Microsoft's Identity Information Server in 2003 before it was released to the public. From those early days with Exchange and Active Directory, Oxford Computer Group has grown to be one of the largest identity management consultancies in the world, with offices in the UK, the US, Germany, and the Netherlands, and with a full complement of services built not just around identity management, but also including mobile device management and data rights management. And James, if you'd advance to the next slide. Thank you. As you can see from the slide, we're in the business of educating, preparing, and providing implementation and support services to our clients so they are successful, supporting their highly dynamic and highly mobile workforces. What this slide doesn't show is that we know how to span IT infrastructure, the IT infrastructure environment, whether you're on-prem, fully cloud, or whether you're deploying hybrid solutions. We do it all. We have deep relationships with Microsoft and the partner community to bring you the best solution possible for your identity management needs. But enough about Oxford. We want to get to what you really want to hear, how MIM is going to allow your companies to better manage identities, and how do we get from FIM to MIM. A small bit of housekeeping first, and James, again, if you could advance the slide. We are going to give away a HP stream today at the end of this presentation. We're going to take the folks who are currently logged on and automatically enroll you in the drawing. You do have to be a U.S. citizen to win, and we will be doing that immediately after the presentation. As I've said, one of our engineers here has told me that this device can even be upgraded to Windows 10. I've got one myself, and they're kind of fun to play with. So finally, your speaker, Oxford's Chief Technical Officer and former RAF pilot, James Cowling. Take it away, James.
Thank you, Steve, for that marvelous introduction. So welcome, everybody. I greet you from sunny Frankfurt, where we had some excitement yesterday. But it's all calmed down now, and they've put the fires out, so it's all very calm. Now, I would like to start. We're going to talk a little bit about some basics of what Forefront Identity Management, this is our current product, is. I want to talk a little bit about that, but I would like to ask you some questions to start with to get a feeling for the audience. So with a bit of luck, you'll see a poll, and I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, just to sort of say what sort of experience you have with Microsoft Identity Management products. And it's coming in. This is anonymous, by the way, so you're not going to get judged. 79, 80%. I'm getting a pretty good feeling. We don't need everybody to vote necessarily. 85%. Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good idea. So I'm getting less than 10% none, and then around about a third with some, and then everybody else either some or expert. So My assumption seems to be paying off, that there's a good deal of experience in the room. For those of you with no experience whatsoever, some of this stuff is going to go a little bit over your head. We are going to talk about features, of course, and we are going to talk about basically what the systems are for. At the end, there'll be another poll to see if anybody's interested in having another webinar based on the fundamentals of MIM, to really sort of start at the beginning. So maybe that'll be of interest at the end. But thank you for doing that poll. So fundamentally, let's go back. Fundamentally then, we're dealing with the Microsoft Identity and Access environment. This is where MIM sits firmly. And MIM is very much an organic development of the Forefront Identity Manager 2010 product, specifically the R2 version, which came out 2 or 3 years ago. And the components that we're used to having with that, the service and its portal, which run our various workflows, the approvals, and provides us with a management user interface, both for the management of FIM itself and the management of the identity and role and access data that FIM can manage. The synchronization service that pumps the data to the target systems, reads it from the target systems, and handles transformations that we may configure. We have certificate management pieces which allow us to hook our certificate authority up to an automated system which reminds us about things like renewals that are upcoming for certificates, and allows our users to engage in workflows around certificates, whether it's smart cards or non-smart card certificates. We have reporting components which out of the box uses the System Center Service Manager data warehousing as its store. And we have a roles engine under the brand of Behold, and that provides role model management. In other words, you just define your roles for role-based access control, and also the assignment of those roles to people. Provides a series of other functions around role management as well. But those are fundamentally the pieces of the Forefront Identity Manager platform. An important and increasingly important part of the world that we work in is Azure Active Directory. So this is Microsoft's Cloud Directory. It provides a number of identity and access management functions already. And we have a tool called AAD Sync, which is based on the FIM synchronization engine, which provides us with a synchronization capability in that direction. So when Steve was introducing, he was talking about hybrid environments where you're using some on-premise components, some cloud components, and these are the two things that we'll be talking about to some extent. So we'll just do it really quickly. Those of you who have FIM, I'd be interested to know, if you wouldn't mind quickly voting, those who actually have it installed. So in other words, this is actually specifically relevant as an upgrade scenario. This is one of the easier questions of the day. Okay, I think that's good enough. 85% voted. So we're getting about 80% have got FIM, which is good. Thanks for that. Just the last one before I carry on talking. Just this issue of Azure Active Directory. To how many of you is this familiar as a platform or as a concept? Okay. Pretty much as expected, I would say. So about 80% of you have either seen a bit of it or much of it. So again, for those of you not at all familiar, there are a series of sort of foundational webinars that we do run from time to time, and I would certainly recommend those to you. This is indeed, of course, this is about MIM, but thank you for the votes. Okay, so Microsoft have these components. We're constantly busy engaging in building them. For the record, this is a fairly standard picture of the high-level architecture of the FIM platform, and I'm going to be talking sort of relative to this picture. In other words, these are the things we have today. How does MIM compare? This is really what this webinar is going to base on, because there simply won't be time to talk in detail about all of these various components. I will pass on that. By the way, I'm watching the questions pane in my interface here. So if you do have any questions, you'll feel free to type them as you go along, and I'll try to address them as the moment arises. But for the time being, we'll move on, because this is a fairly, for those of you who know FIM to some extent, this will be a fairly familiar idea that we have a FIM platform with a synchronization service and then some separate services for certificate management and reporting, and by the way, the role management stuff that actually isn't on this picture, and the various identity stores or target systems at the bottom. So this is a fairly, I think, familiar architecture for those who've seen anything of FIM already. So let's talk about MIM then. So MIM is the successor product to FIM. The forefront brand, as many of you will be aware, is generally being wound down by Microsoft in any case, and the identity management pieces have been taken out of that brand. So it is now Microsoft Identity Manager 2015. It is still in development. A media release date is being talked about, so not going to be any more specific than that, but well, it might be a little bit sort of May, June time is what mainly June time is what they're hoping for at the moment. Obviously that is subject to change. We have what is supposed to be the final preview release before the final release. That is the CTP, Community Technical Preview, the third one. We had the first one back in the summer last year, and that's been available since the end of February. Everything I say in this presentation is in principle subject to change. Of course, it's reasonably well nailed down by now, but don't hold me to it. If they do make decisions, it's not in my gift to hold them to it. But anyway, so the product is in development, and here we are. We have a preview. It is available generally, if any of you are interested in it, for download. There are virtual machines which you can download, or you can download the installers and upgrade a test machine of your choice. The three themes that we're going to be looking at, that Microsoft have spent some time, obviously a good deal of time, working on. It's important that we have continuity. Many of us, something like 80% of us, have made some investments in FIM already, and it would be not particularly a happy moment if we discovered that we couldn't maintain those investments and had to do significant work to support the next version. So continuity is important. Those of us who use it are aware of some modernization requirements, and we'll talk about those. And then the sort of big headline change that Microsoft have produced in this version is the privileged access management components. And we'll be spending probably most of our time in this session talking about those because they're the newest part. I will be flagging other new features, but they'll be going by reasonably fast because they're reasonably straightforward. So those are the three themes that we're really going to work on. And let's talk first about continuity. So as I've said, it builds on FIM 2010 R2, and to the extent that absolutely all the components in the FIM product remain supported, nothing is removed from the product, and all the server components will be an in-place upgrade to get to MIM 2015. So fundamentally, we expect no significant re-engineering work for the existing components. It is worth pointing out that, as some of you will already be aware, there is a deprecated features list, and I've given you the link there. These are features of FIM today, but also will remain in MIM largely, but they're features of FIM which in some future version will be removed from the product. Now that some future version isn't MIM, so it's really for the time when Microsoft re-engineer the configuration of the synchronization piece so that the synchronization parts are no longer found in the portal database, but are stored directly in the synchronization database, where actually, in all honesty, they probably belonged all along. This gives us a lot more flexibility in the way that the portal database talks to the synchronization database, and this will allow us to be more flexible in our use of the portal agents. Now, it's not particularly significant at this point what the details of that is. The point is there is a deprecated features list. It remains in force, and if you're going to continue working with FIM and then MIM, you should be aware of those deprecated features. We, of course, are in a good position to advise you on those, but I confess that I have not tested every single one of those in person, but I am not aware of any deprecated features that have been removed in this version of the product. So we need to be aware of them, but not afraid of them. There is some fear, uncertainty, and doubt around in the market. There has been some misinformation spread by certain competitors of Microsoft, to the extent that Microsoft isn't developing FIM any further in Redmond. Now that is superficially true because FIM isn't being developed in, or MIM isn't being developed in Redmond. It's being developed in the Tel Aviv, Israel R&D center of Microsoft. So while superficially true, it's absolutely not true to say that Microsoft is not investing in the identity management platform, because Microsoft is investing in the identity management platform and will continue to do so. So we are seeing the sync engine as a piece of technology. There's a parallel development going on in the AAD sync engine, and there we're already seeing the move of the synchronization rules out of the portal database into the synchronization database. So if you look at AAD sync, you can see what our future may look like, because that is, they've already made some of the moves in this rather more limited synchronization tool that is fundamentally designed to synchronize your on-premise Active Directory with your Azure Active Directory, your cloud directory. That has a rather more limited scope of use, and therefore they've been able to narrow down what it does and make some engineering changes. So you can see the changes that are going on, and you can see the investments being made. So the message of this slide: continuity. Investments are being secured. We can move on to MIM without fear of significant re-engineering, which is good news fundamentally. Now, on the integration side, we know that, those of us who use it, but FIM is delivered and MIM will continue to be delivered with default scenarios. This is fundamentally in its portal configuration, where the default configuration of the portal is fairly AD focused, so it has default fields and default pull-down lists for group types and group scopes and various things that are very AD focused. That's precisely what you'd expect from Microsoft. The portal, based on our experience, the portal usage is, generally speaking, completely acceptable for technical work, both in the primary administrator category and delegated administration down to the technical level. So technical guys, help desk guys, are generally speaking reasonably comfortable using the web interface. Down at the end user delegation, if you like, right down at the end user level, there are various end user specific interfaces. So self-service password reset, SSPR, will be an expression many of you will know. SSAU probably isn't very well known. This is the self-service account unlock. This is a new feature in MIM, which I'll be showing you some pictures of. Certificate management interfaces. So there are various interfaces that end users use. If we present them with a portal, generally speaking, we present them with a rather customized portal that is user-friendly to an extent that the FIM portal sometimes isn't. So there are some scenarios that the out-of-the-box features in MIM simply don't cover, and Microsoft don't even pretend that they do. So the main thing is that Microsoft provides MIM and FIM as an integration platform, and they've done a lot of work to make the platform extensible and programmable to the extent that we can provide interfaces that are very suitable to the scenarios that we're trying to cover. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all product. Your out-of-the-box interfaces are great for many scenarios, and there will be some scenarios where you'll want to reach for a developer and do some work to develop a UI or do some UI integration. And I'll be showing you some examples of that very shortly. So you've got various choices of using the default UI components, extend and enhance, or replace in some scenarios. And as I say, I'm going to show you some examples of that. The main thing about this in the product is that we have modern APIs. Now, this wasn't the case in every respect in FIM. So we have a new API for certificate management. So the API is now RESTful, and it is also claims aware. So we can now do certificate management integration work with non-domain joined clients, and we can do it in a much more easily integratable way with modern application development environments. So we have a new API that makes it much more easy to integrate, which is good news. The privileged account management piece, and I'll be talking about that in detail, has its own separate API underneath it so that we can build integration scenarios with that directly built into it. And our familiar MIM service API, so our FIM service API, is already a reasonably modern FIM web service API, and therefore gives us lots of integration opportunities. The next picture shows you some of these components, and sort of going around sort of anti-clockwise from the bottom left there, you've got a picture of the FIM portal for those of you who haven't seen it before. It's actually a customized portal. You can see some airport-specific features there, and Astro Lux is an airport baggage trolley that you can drive around. So there's a picture of that. Then the second picture is a password reset self-service portals. This is a sort of user-friendly, simple little web portal for answering questions which lead you to a password reset, in this case in German, which is perhaps less easy to use for some of you. And then there is a complete custom replacement user interface. This happens to be one that Oxford have written and deployed in many customers with some friendly drag and drop type interfaces for application assignment, for example, down at the bottom. And up at the top, just for completeness, is our certificate management portal. So there are various portals, and you can see them here. They're customizable to a large extent, they're localizable to a large extent, and in the case of the one at the bottom right, you can see a complete replacement user interface that sits on the web services that FIM provides. So this is the emphasis here, is that we can already, and we will continue to be able to build integrated UI, and we have even better web services underlying the product with which to do that. So very accessible web services for development work. So this is the rest of the complete replacement UI. I think in the interest of time, it is actually a video which takes about 6 minutes, but I think in the interest of time, I won't show it right now. But you can see that we've built hierarchical structures. There are role assignments and role inheritances and all sorts of good stuff there. This is a Silverlight based user interface at this stage, and there will be an HTML5 version which is in the works. We're proposing to reveal that at our September conference in Germany in first week of September, which quite randomly coincides with the Beer Festival. So that will be interesting. I can show you that video. I think we're going to make that available alongside these slides if anybody does want to see what a custom interface might do. You'll be able to have a look at that video later on when we've got it organized. So a new feature, self-service account unlock, commonly requested feature. So the idea is that when I change my password at my desktop, I don't immediately change my password on my various mobile devices or my tablet that's sitting at home or whatever it is. And so it's reasonably common that my old password is still in place on various devices, and I get account lockouts going on. I get my various devices trying to collect my mail and locking me out. So I don't want to have to change my password every time that happens because I run out of passwords. So they've built in an account unlock option where you can keep your current password. You can see the FIM branding. They just haven't decided on the MIM branding yet, so they haven't changed it in this screenshot. But this is a MIM-only feature at this stage, and as you can see, will allow you to just unlock your account without changing your password. Okay, so it's a fairly small, but in some scenarios quite significant change, which will help us keep our users happy. Okay, so there's that. Now, so that's just an example of a UI extension based on the web services. Now, modernization was the second theme that we talked about, and this is kind of split into two pieces. First of all, the components that we have. We've been struggling a little bit with FIM. FIM hasn't been supported on Windows Server 2012 R2. They were too busy building MIM to do the testing when the new platform came out. So we're pleased to report that the MIM platform is completely supported on Windows Server 2012 R2, which is good, obviously necessary and entirely to be expected, but nevertheless welcome. The new APIs that we've got are RESTful APIs, which is good for our developer friends, and in a number of cases, the functions that MIM uses and indeed will use in future actually use some cloud-based components for the execution of their work. So a good example of that is the multi-factor authentication that we can use for self-service password reset or account unlock, where we can use the Azure features of that. So there are effectively proxy components inside the MIM product that will talk to the Azure MFA components to do the sending of SMSs or the telephone call to my desk phone in my home office or whatever it is that we've configured, all mediated via the cloud service, which is in communication with telecommunications platforms in any case, so we don't have to manage any contracts with telecoms providers out of our on-prem system. So it's just an intelligent and modern way of handling some of these infrastructure pieces out of the on-prem solutions using cloud components. Reporting is another example. I asked really nicely if I could show you some of this, but they said they haven't got anything ready to show you yet. This is not going to be available at release time, but it has already been discussed in public forums that there will be some reporting solutions based on Azure databases and Azure reporting functionalities. So we're thoroughly looking forward to that, but I'm afraid I wasn't given anything to show you today. So it's a shame, but there it is. I've got a question here. Let's see if I can read it. It says here, will the REST APIs allow applications to create and manage objects on the FIM portal? You can already use the FIM API, and in future the MIM API, to manage objects into the FIM portal. In fact, it's the only supported way of writing to the FIM portal database. So using the web service interface is the way of managing objects in the FIM portal, to answer that question. It is true to say, for completeness, that the existing FIM and therefore MIM portal API or service API isn't RESTful. It's a Windows Communication Foundation web service at this stage. I might ask you later, for how many of you it would be important that it was RESTful, but I haven't got that set up yet, but we'll come back to that. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, so the component modernization, then we've got these new components, and they are modern, and Microsoft, as they upgrade these components, are doing them in a modern fashion. Additionally, they've been thinking about scenarios in a modern way, and mainly that's to do with hybrid scenarios in the sense of integrating things outside of our private network into our private network, whether that's our cloud activities or whether that's collaboration with external partners, external customers, external providers of various services, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of thinking going on around those scenarios. In order to support those scenarios and the devices which come along with them, so various sorts of tablets, not all of them Microsoft, not all of which of course have the capability or the desirability to join a domain. For example, for certificate enrollment, many of those domain join dependencies have been taken away. And with our REST APIs, particularly with our claims-aware REST APIs, we get a good deal of external integration capability based on fundamentally broad platforms which don't have to be very Microsofty. I do have a question because it's a particular thing of mine that I'm interested in. How many of you are interested in the external collaboration scenarios, because it does go to the capabilities of our various APIs. So I'm going to post a quick poll, keep you busy. If you wouldn't mind having a quick think about how important external collab scenarios are for you. I'm fully aware that some of you will say, well, they might be, but just not now. I've got more important things to do. I'll get to the 85% level. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so about 20% of you are saying low, and then about half of you are saying medium. So another 30% saying high. So interesting. I'm going to just let you finish. That's fine. That's good numbers. Thank you for that. Okay. So that represents, I'll go back a sec, that represents then our modernization stuff. So they've modernized the platform. We can install it on Windows Server 2012 R2, and it's all good. Then the scenarios are much more cloudy, and they're much more aware of, or we can all be much more aware of cloudy and collaboration scenarios as we need them. Good. Certificate management, this is a quick one. Those of us using certificate management in the past, there were a number of limitations in the previous implementation, particularly with domain joined requirements, the integration, the workflow activity were all dependent on being domain joined. You had to be identifiable as an Active Directory account. We had a strong Internet Explorer dependency. The web UI wasn't particularly user-friendly and so on, and there was no strong auth support, oddly enough. And that has improved. So we have a new modern client for Windows 8.1, so we can, particularly for virtual smart card activities, for example, a surface such as the one I'm speaking to you from can therefore enroll, even if it's not domain joined, it can enroll for virtual smart cards. And as you can see from the configuration screenshot there, it is possible to define ADFS as your authentication provider for your entire certificate management activity, which gives us claims-aware abilities, so that if we're in many scenarios, you're providing certificates specifically for external collaboration partners to be securely authenticated to your systems, and it's therefore important that they should be able to come with their trusted identity over a claims-aware connection, rather than having to have a shadow AD account with us, which is kind of no longer the best way of doing things. So it's good to see certificate management thoroughly updated and modernized, modern app, modern API, and this is the sort of thing we're talking about. So it's good to see that work going on. Then we come to what is probably the biggest piece, which is the privileged access management part. Now, I'm not going to read through the bullets on this slide because there are plenty of other slides coming. This is just a headline slide. One of the things that tends to get bracketed out of an initial identity management project tends to be the IT guys. We do our best to manage the IT guys, but they're not very easy to slot into sort of standard role models and standard patterns of behavior, because IT guys go and get permissions to all sorts of different systems, to be admins and to do all sorts of things. Equally, those accesses are extremely sensitive. We don't want any automated system. We're rather nervous about automated systems doing unexpected things to these identities and maybe losing all of our domain admins or something unpleasant like that. So they tend to get a little bit, not exactly neglected, because we're of course very aware of them, but we tend not to include them in our identity management very early on. So there are very good reasons to pay, obviously, close attention to our privileged accounts. And I'm going to talk you through the scenarios for which this is important and what Microsoft have delivered to us to help us fix it. Now, this background picture, some of you may have seen it before, but it was a specific attack that was thoroughly investigated and analyzed. So this is real. I'm not going to name the name, but it turned out that for about 11 months there was evidence of preparation going on, and then over about a 2-day period there was an attack where a particular employee was specifically targeted. So they were researching this person's interests and background. They designed a particular piece of software that would attack her particular environment, and they sent it just to her with a spear phishing email, which she was almost bound to fall for. So she installed it, and using the privileged, she had to give it elevated permissions to get it installed, and in that elevated permission state there was theft of credentials going on, and with those credentials that were cached on her machine, the attackers were able to do the two important things that attackers like to do, namely lateral movement. They move to the next machine across, where they find some more cached credentials, which they can then use to move to the next machine across and find some more cached credentials, and eventually they'll find cached credentials that have escalated privileges. So they'll use those escalated privileges to move across again to a new computer, find some more cached credentials, and eventually, in this particular attack, it took them around 48 hours to get to the domain admin level, and they stole domain admin cached credentials, created themselves suitable accounts, and for the next 13 months stole data at will from this environment, at which point it was then discovered and closed down. Now, it's all a question of looking at yourself in the mirror. I do speak to people who can absolutely reasonably say that they would never have fallen for that and they would have detected it earlier and the lots would be done. But I think we can all agree that there is this vulnerability in our networks, generally speaking, based on social engineering, very customized software. So virus software and so on is not particularly useful at this level. And the lateral movement is a well-known thing. Now, the lateral movement turns out to be possible because the credentials that are cached are persistently privileged. So they are cached credentials, but of course that gives you an account. When you log in as that account, you then get the credentials. Now, if that account was only temporarily a privileged account, this is our just-in-time admin concept. If it was only temporarily a privileged account, then it matters a great deal less if someone finds my credentials cached 3 days later on somebody else's computer, because I'm not a domain admin anymore. I was a domain admin for the half hour that I was logged into that computer to do whatever I was doing, but I am no longer that, and therefore the privilege escalation part of this attack is much, much harder to execute. So this is the bit that we're talking about, the just-in-time and just-enough admin concepts, and Microsoft have put in a good deal of work to deliver that to us. So we'll be talking through the steps, the pieces they've given us. I have given a link, it's pretty ugly, but it's a link to the pass the hash mitigation, which is of interest. It's a very interesting document actually written by Microsoft's trusted computing team, trustworthy computing I think it's called, and it's worth a read. Again, when you get this, you can Bing for it if you want to, but it's good stuff. Okay, so fundamentally, from a security perspective, the assumption is that our production network is fundamentally vulnerable to these sorts of attacks, and we can't claim that we have an effective mitigation. We can't say there is no way that this sort of attack could happen in our production network. That is an assumption, but it's an assumption we're prepared to take. This means that from an identity and access point of view, our chain of trust is unreliable. That means if we are getting approvals for things, or if we're getting people to sign up for access controls, and if we're getting access conflicts of separation of duty, for example, if we're getting them authorized, these sorts of things, all these authorizations are based on a network credential, and if the network credentials are untrustworthy, then our whole business there is untrustworthy. So we basically can't rely on the identities that are being presented in that production network. This is a fundamental conclusion. So the fundamental scenario that Microsoft is presenting us with, we are invited to establish what they're calling a bastion, or a private forest. It's actually a forest, not necessarily a network. It's a forest, a new forest, which is very small, has relatively small populations involved in it, and they're relatively technically skilled populations. These are the people who are least likely to fall for phishing attacks because they're rather aware of these things. And there's no down-level functionality. We've got no NTLM going on. We've got no Exchange installed or any other systems installed which are knee patching or provide us with an extended attack surface. So that bastion network is a well-secured, high security awareness environment where we can perform trusted activities around privileged access. We can insist, for example, that every user in that network has to use a smart card or has to use some multi-factor auth, for example, to do anything. So we can do a good deal to lock that down, provided we're not trying to provide any services. And there are plenty of services which are not very happy with strong auth. They use all sorts of other down-level protocols or simpler protocols to do their authentication. So we can establish this bastion network. It might just be as small as 2 domain controllers and a jump server and a terminal server that lets people get into the network. And our production network trusts the identities out of that. It's a one-way trust. So the important thing about the one-way trust is that you can't access the bastion network from a computer joined to the production domain, because the trust is the wrong way around. And this means that we're protected against bad behavior in the production domain, production forest. And all of the permissions in the bastion network are transient. In other words, they're only assigned for a short period of time. And the admin groups in the production network are fundamentally expected to be empty. Okay, so we have no permissions granted to admins in the production network. So stealing credentials is not going to be any help because they don't have any rights. The groups exist because the groups are trusted by the various applications to do the admin. So they have to still exist, and the SIDs that they possess are, of course, the things that we need to have access to. So when we look at the implementation of this, little picture is by no means a complete picture. For information, we will be doing a deep dive, technical deep dive around PAM in the release time frame of MIM. We'll actually be going into it in a lot more detail. But fundamentally, then you can see the two forests there. Simple picture. Some of our users, a highly technical help desk user there, who does exist in the bastion domain, and a bunch of other people who exist in the production domain. So we harden our bastion AD forest. We put MIM into the AD forest, in the bastion forest, and we use the various tools that Microsoft provide to represent groups out of the prod environment as both groups, sort of shadow groups, in the Bastion Active Directory, and also roles, objects in the Bastion MIM implementation. So they exist in the MIM system and they exist in the Active Directory. And of course what we're going to do is assign the roles in the Bastion MIM with a time to live, with a maximum lifetime that I can apply for. So a very, very sensitive account might have a relatively short lifetime, might be only a few minutes in some cases, and maybe less sensitive, or those accounts with more complicated admin activities to do might need a bit longer. But we can set up a TTL on a per role basis. Another important part of this environment is the candidate concept. So the roles in the MIM system have a candidate list. Remind me to do my seminar. My candidate list is pre-populated, of course. This can be done, and there's a big discussion to be had about this, but this, generally speaking, in my view, would be done in the production network. So we're going to get candidates approved in the production network, but that's going to not be automatically propagated into the Bastion network because there's less trust. We're going to do that with eyes, with people actually typing these lists of candidates into the Bastion network to give us an extra check before they end up in there. There's a discussion to be had about how many people we invite into the Bastion network. If we invite all the people who are going to do approvals into the Bastion network, then we can do our approvals in the Bastion network, but we've then slightly compromised our low population, high security model by inviting a bunch of managers into the Bastion network who are probably less security aware and more of a risk than our technical guys. Now that's a matter for discussion. I'm certainly not presenting it as an absolute requirement, but I'm assuming that the approval and the assembly of candidate lists, who can be a domain admin in theory, that's all pre-authorized and pre-collected in your production network and then transferred into your into your Bastion network, almost by hand, or with some very careful checks wrapped around it. So our roles exist. A role can in principle have multiple groups in it. It is a proper role concept. Quite often they're going to be one-to-one matches between a role and a group, but there is that. The tools that generate the groups also populate the SID history, so that using our one-way trust into the production environment, once a user in the Bastion domain does have one of these groups as a membership, they will then be able to go back using the trust into production, carrying the SID, and do their admin work as if they were properly authorized in the production network, which of course they're not. So that is the way it fundamentally works. We need to organize some sort of client access into the Bastion environment because the clients connected to the production domain will not have any permissions in the Bastion domain. We'll need to organize some sort of jump server or second platform so that our users can actually get to it, but that's just one more piece. Okay, so that will be the implementation. So the usage workflow, I think you're all getting the idea, hopefully. No users have persistent privileged access. A user comes along, I'm a candidate, I can then go to a portal, and I'll show you a picture in a minute. I go to a portal and request the particular access that I need. That does a couple of things. That sets up an audit trail in the MIM database, and it also makes me a member in the appropriate group straight away. And the interface that I can use, these are actually sample UIs. Microsoft is releasing these portals initially as just samples, so it'll be up to you. In terms of support, they are there to be used if you feel like it, but they're not supported in the classical Microsoft sense straight out of the box. But they're perfectly functional portals. They show how to build a portal, how to use the APIs to do the various things you have to do. So the bottom left, you can see there, I'm logged into my private. They use a private domain, priv, for their Bastion domain. So I see the roles that I'm a candidate for, and I can click a button. Here you can see extend, because I already have it, but you can apply for it initially and then extend it if you need to extend it. This is all logged, and you can have a maximum period of time, our time to live, which gives you an expiration time. So this is my activity as a user. I log into the Bastion domain as an admin, as a user, and request my admin permissions. And then the other picture you can see at the top right, there is the audit trail. So you can have a look at who it has been using and is currently using admin permissions over time. So these exist. They're based on good solid data foundations and API foundations, and the portals, the sample portals, are delivered with source code and everything, so you can pick them up and integrate them into your own solutions as you feel like it. So now it's pretty clear. You've got your permission in the Bastion network. You then use that to go to the production network and access the various privileged things you need to do. At the end of the time period involved, your request expires, PAM removes the user from the shadow group, and the user loses access. We have monitoring and auditing. Auditing is handled by MIM effectively. All the requests are in the MIM database, and therefore you have, as the previous screenshot showed, you have the capability of looking at all those requests over time. And there is a monitoring service which monitors primarily the production network groups, and you can see a screenshot there. A user that is not in the PAM system is detected in a monitored group. So if we don't have the appropriate request, we can pick up that event and say, hang on, there's something unexpected going on there. Take a good look at how someone got into a privileged group without going through PAM. So it's a pretty round system. It's got all the pieces we need to start to implement some privileged access on a just-in-time basis. Takes us to the last few points. We've 10 minutes, 12 minutes left. So the last few points. In terms of upgrade then, because I promised to talk a bit about upgrade, for the components that we have today, as I said right at the beginning, in-place upgrade, we are going to assume that there will be some patching required. We don't know yet exactly what the jumping off patch level needs to be before we can do our in-place upgrade. Certainly I would expect to be at the level of FIMR2 Service Pack 1. There have been a series, probably a dozen or more patches since then. So watch this space for information, or watch Microsoft space for information about exactly which patches you'll need. I would expect most of you to be patching your existing FIM systems reasonably consistently, but if not, you just have to be aware of exactly what the jumping off patch level is. From the client component side of things, there are components, for example, installed to support integrations with Outlook. There are clients installed to support self-service password reset from a domain-joined Windows computer. These components are going to need to be replaced. I have it on good authority that Microsoft is simply assuming that you will replace them. There is a sort of statement, well, they might work, but we're assuming you're going to replace them. So you should take that away, that you'll need to do a software deployment to upgrade or to remove and replace your client components. They're not massive things, and most people already deploy them with software deployment tools anyway, so it's not huge, but you just need to be ready for that. While we claim that all existing functionality remains supported, don't forget to test your systems. This is not something you can replace. You need to make sure you install a test system and run through your test program to make sure it's all working. Licensing is interesting simply because of the timing. Those of you with software assurance will have valid MIM licenses as a result of your software assurance. If you need new licenses, it's worth pointing out that the cloudy packages that Microsoft is currently offering around Azure Active Directory Premium and the Enterprise Mobility Suite, which does include Azure Active Directory Premium licenses, they give you access to MIM. So they give you a MIM cal and also unlimited server licenses once you've got a sensible number. So given that your MIM server licenses go at about 10 grand a pop or something, you can save yourself a reasonable amount of money by using these models, and you get a good deal more functionality. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of EMS and ADP right now, but it's just a heads up that if you're going to need to buy new licenses anyway, you might want to take a look at particularly the EMS licenses, which are remarkably cheap for what you get. In Outline, you get device management, content management, and identity management all in one piece. And I can talk to you at great length about the interesting features of those, but just not now. Okay, so in the upgrade side, it's good news. It's not going to be incredibly challenging. So as far as the training is concerned, okay, I've got a, before I get on to training, I've just got a couple of questions. Will there be any API added for the sync service or just WMI capability? In the initial MIM release, we're not expecting an API in that sense. There are already some PowerShell capabilities around the sync service, which continue to be supported, but no API in the sense we've been talking about just around the sync service, not at this stage. And the question here, isn't FIM sync service supported on Win 2012 The answer is no, it's not. Can you please send a PDF of the presentation as a link to the slides? Yes. Okay, I'll take that, sending the slides. Still a dependency on Internet Explorer for FIM-CM. My understanding is no, there isn't. Will you be able to distribute the presentation? I don't know the answer to that. I don't really have a problem with it. It's not particularly secret. It's for privileged, yes. Do you know if PC and S will be supported? Yes, it will. My information is that it will also be supported on Windows Server 2012 R2 domain controllers, which is not the case today. It's been a problem for many people. So yes, all around good news there. So a quick word about training. We will be upgrading our training courses, and they'll be coming out around release time. We're not currently planning a specific upgrade training for reasons that you should be able to see in this presentation. There just isn't enough meat really in the existing features that have been changed to do a formal upgrade course. So whatever you've learned in your previous FIM training will still be entirely relevant to MIM. But we will be doing a course for the PAM components, real deep dive, because it's of significant security relevance, and therefore, yeah, there'll be a specific piece about that. Are PowerShell components being made for MIM, or will be still using WMI? Well, the PowerShell commandlets already exist, but fundamentally they just use the WMI anyway. So really the answer is we're sticking with WMI at this stage. Okay, moving on. So this really bringing us slowly to a close. We've got a few webinars already planned. So Intune, this is device management around mobile device management, case studies around cloud enablement, and as I already suggested, a PAM deep dive piece. I am going to ask a quick question just for our organizers here. Are you interested in a webinar on fundamentals of MIMS, kind of an entry level? So taking it right back to the beginning of what it is we're all about. Okay, we've got a very good response to that. Looking at about 80% of people interested in a fundamentals webinar. Well, we should definitely do one of those. Sounds like a big need. Okay, well that's good news. Okay, about 3/4 of you voted. I think that's given us a representative sample. Thank you for that. Okay, so those are the webinars, and I think I can safely say we will be adding a fundamentals piece into that just to get into some of the more high-level conversations as to what the product does. These are the courses that are currently scheduled. Given the timeframes we're talking about, with a bit of luck, they'll already have been upgraded to MIM by then. But as I say, the technologies and the approaches that we talk about in those courses are still entirely relevant to MIM. So it's really a slightly cosmetic upgrade. There are some API changes and so on that we will need to put in there, but it's fundamentally still relevant. So
I'm going to jump in
there we have it.
Second, James.
You may. I've got to the end anyway.
So for those upcoming FIM courses, the instructors are the same people that are busily writing the MIM courses, so you'll be able to ask all your MIM questions in those classes. Okay,
yeah. Thanks for that. And it says here, it says, we're behind the curve with ILM. Yeah, it's a fairly common, you'll have to do quite a few upgrades actually if you're down at that level. You'll need to do an upgrade to FIM RTM, then an upgrade to FIM R2, then an upgrade to FIM R2 SP1, and then an upgrade to MIM. So you may need to get some help with that because some of the installers are quite hard to get your hands on for some of those earlier versions, but it's very doable. I upgraded a major international airline in exactly that way not very long ago. And their recent strike was nothing to do with me. Okay, fantastic. So thank you for those questions, all good questions. I will, we've got about 5 more minutes, so if you've got more questions, go ahead and ask them. For those of you who want to drop off, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time. By all means, stay in touch. I'll put my email address up here. So by all means, drop me a line. This will be made available, and we'll be making this presentation and the video I didn't show you will be made available. And I have no objection to you distributing it. If you'd like to distribute it, I just appreciate keeping the Oxford credit on it since we put the work in. But by all means, distribute it to any interested parties. So thank you very much.
And
if you have no further questions.
James, a quick reminder, we will be doing the drawing here in a few minutes.
Yes.
We've got to go through all the attendees, verify that they're U.S. residents, and after we've had a chance to do that, we will be notifying the winner, as we'll need to get your mailing address.
Fantastic. Okay.